Hello guys, S.T.A.L.K.E.R Plays, I'm Fabio Pisco and welcome to my channel.
Okay.
Today I bring you another GPU comparison, this time focusing mostly on the RTX 5070 and the RX 9070. And by the way, thanks Nvidia for sending the 5070 and thanks AMD for sending the 9070 of course. And thank you to the sponsor for sponsoring this video. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mall, bringing you lots of software deals like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2019 or 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and for all of these you can use my SKG discount code for 30% off, getting a Windows 11 serial key for $22 and a Windows 10 one for only $15. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system. So, RTX 5070 versus RX 9070, and even though this video is mostly focused on those two GPUs, we're going to have some other GPUs like the RX 7800 XT, the RX 9070 XT, and the RTX 4070 Super, for a bit more perspective. And the most important thing when we're talking about some GPUs in the same performance bracket is the price. In America, we currently have the RTX 5070 being sold at MSRP, costing around $549, with the RX 9070 having around the same MSRP, but being most times at least $50 above, at $599. And if you want to get an older GPU like the 4070 Super, in most cases it isn't really worth it. Of course, unless you're getting it second-hand, because it is around the same price as the other two cards. And if you live in Europe, you most likely can get an RTX 5070 for around 560 euros, which is a decent deal considering the MSRP, the RX 9070 at around 630 euros, and the noise that you're hearing is from my dog. Yeah, just walking around, that's what I meant. Again, the RX 9070 for around 630 euros, which is 70 euros above the 5070, and now the RTX 4070 Super hovers around the same value as the RTX 5070. With this being said, a lot of people prefer to buy Nvidia cards due to their features like the LSS. And with this being said, again, the RX 9000 series now have FSR4, which is really close to the LSS4 transformer model, or at least very close to the LSS4 CNN model, and the 9070 brings 16GB instead of the 12GB on the RTX 5070. So one more time, which card should you get? Starting with Premiere 2024, we have a mixed CPU and GPU benchmark when it comes to rendering, and it seems that the AMD cards have the lowest results here, with the RTX 5070 performing considerably well in this benchmark, being even faster than the RX 9070 XT. As for image generation with Stable Diffusion and the UL Procyon benchmark, we have way more data. We have stock, OC and OC plus AMD model or OC plus Tensor RT. If we're talking about the ON and X performance only, well, the Nvidia cards are both slower than the 9070 and 9070 XT, but as soon as we use the Tensor RT, they get faster. This means that while the 9070 takes 2.3 seconds to generate one image, the RTX 5070 does it in less than 2. Not a big difference though. And now we have a new addition to our benchmarks, and this was added since people were requesting data of the performance for large language models, and this benchmark includes ones like Pi or Phi 3.5, Llama, and some more. As for the results, we can see that the Nvidia cards are quite superior here when it comes to points, with the 5070 being 72% faster than the RX 9070. Although that difference doesn't really translate when we analyze tokens per second, where the 5070 is now only 17% faster. Interesting results, I guess. As for VR benchmarks, we have the Orange Room, which is kind of a CPU and GPU benchmark mixed together, where the Nvidia card has a slight advantage. But as soon as we move to the Blue Room that stresses mostly the GPU, the 9070 is now 5% faster than the 5070. And in case you haven't noticed, both the 9070 and 5070 get a much bigger advantage when overclocking than the other cards presented here. And finalizing with Blender Open Data, which is not 100% accurate in the real world scenarios, I must say, we have the Nvidia cards completely destroying the AMD ones, with the 5070 being slightly slower than the 4070 Super at stock, but outmatching it when overclocked, also delivering 2.3 times the performance of the 9070. As for gaming benchmarks, we start with Assetto Corsa, and at 1080p all recent cards deliver around the same FPS numbers due to a CPU limitation, but with the overclocked 5070 pulling a bit ahead. At 1440p though, things get more in line with what they should be, with the 5070 now being 15% faster than the 4070 Super and 6% faster than the 9070. And at 4K the results don't really change that much. In this game the Nvidia cards fare very well or really well, with the 5070 beating the 4070 Super by 23%. Counter-Strike 2 is another DX11 title where a kid with a computer from 1993 will kill you 10 times in a row. As for the results, the RX 9000 series aren't that good with this game engine, don't really ask me why, it is what it is, but at 1080p the 9070 still manages to beat the 5070. Although as we move to 1440p, the 9000 series start losing some ground, being now slower than the 5070 and barely faster than the 7800 XT. Which shows that AMD still needs to optimize things for this title, because as we move to 4K, things get even worse, with the 5070 now being 14% faster than the 9070 that somehow delivers the same results as the 9070 XT and 4070 Super. Moving to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 finally puts AMD on a better light, I would say, with the 4070 Super being faster than the 5070, that is only able to match the 7800 XT when overclocked. And things don't really change much at 1440p, where the 9070 is 33% faster than the 5070, and the difference only gets bigger at 4K. Where the 5070 is now able to match the 4070 Super once overclocked, and with the 9070 now being 35% faster. As for Cyberpunk 2077, all the top tier cards are evenly matched at 1080p, since we have a CPU bottleneck, but as soon as we move to 1440p the AMD cards start pulling ahead, with the 9070 being 6% faster than the 5070, that is also considerably faster than the 4070 Super here. And at 4K the difference is even bigger, with the 5070 somehow being 42% faster than the 4070 Super, which is kind of insane, but still being a bit slower than the 9070 that delivers close to 60 FPS. As for Hogwarts Legacy, a game where the AMD GPUs used to strive, the 7800 XT is actually delivering pretty close performance to the 4070 Super, and with consistently higher 1% lows. With the 5070 being a bit slower on average than the 9070, that is also quite slower than the 9070 XT here. At 1440p the 5070 loses some ground, with the 9070 now being 21% faster with much higher 1% lows as well. And at 4K the 5070 just catches up a bit, with the 9070 being 17% faster. When talking about Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, the Nvidia cards are usually faster than their AMD counterparts, but when it comes to the 2024 version, the RDNA 4 cards are considerably faster. At 1080p, the 9070 is 25% faster than the 5070. At 1440p, things change and 20% faster than the 5070, with the 7800 XT now matching the 4070 Super. And I thought that the difference would just get smaller at 4K, but the 9070 is now 22% faster than the 5070, and going from 43 to 52 FPS makes a big difference in terms of smoothness. Alan Wake 2 is kind of an Nvidia tech demo when it comes to technologies, but when it comes to raw performance it works very well on AMD cards, with the 9070 being 27% faster at 1080p. I mean, even the 7800 XT did an outstanding job here. At 1440p the scales get maintained, well, with the 9070 delivering a much better experience of course, and at 4K things are more of the same, but this time with no card being able to achieve 60 average FPS without any kind of upscaling. As for Black Myth Wukong, it is another title that works considerably well with the Nvidia cards of course, and always get packed with all the Nvidia's new technologies and so on, kind of a tech demo as well. I mean, they had the LSS4 almost on day one, while they didn't even implement FSR 3.1. At 1080p and at 1440p we get the RTX 5070 really close to the 9070 in terms of average FPS, but a bit behind in terms of 1% lows. And at 4K, both the 5070 and 9070 are really close in terms of performance, but with the AMD cards still delivering a smoother gameplay. Avatar is one of those titles that has ray tracing constantly enabled, but we still have some very odd results at 1080p, where the 5070 is really close to the 9070 in terms of performance, but the 4070 Super is slightly faster. At 1440p the 5070 loses some ground, but the 4070 Super is still faster, maybe showing us that the ray tracing performance didn't increase as we thought it did. At 4K the 5070 and the 4070 Super are virtually on par finally, with the 9070 being faster now and the 9070 XT being the only card able to achieve 60 average FPS. Starfield uses Bethesda's game engine that usually likes AMD GPUs, but it simply likes RDNA 4 better, with the 9070 being at least 18% faster than the 5070, that is also slower than the 4070 Super. At 1440p things are more or less the same, with the 5070 needing to be overclocked to be at around 70 FPS, and at 4K it barely reaches 4070, while the 9070 delivers 58, being now 24% faster. As for S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, it is kind of the opposite, since it now likes Nvidia cards more. And that's why we see the 5070 matching the 4070 Super, with both beating the 9070 overclock versus overclock. And the same happens at 1440p. We need to mention though that the AMD cards deliver much better 1% lows, because in case you don't really know, the closer the 1% lows are to the averages, the smoother the gameplay will be. At 4K I was expecting the 9070 to pull ahead a bit, but it was actually the opposite, with the 5070 now being the fastest card, but with none of them even reaching 50 FPS. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 uses Crytek engine, another game engine that loves Nvidia GPUs. Also, all cards were retested in this game, as the 7000 and 9000 series from AMD got a little FPS boost. At 1440p we have the 5070 still being 12% faster than the 4070 Super and 7% faster than the 9070, and it is only at 4K that the 9070 is able to match the 5070, that is now 19% faster than the 4070 Super. Interesting. And even though the Alters, which is a new addition to our game benchmarks, is in fact Unreal Engine 5 like S.T.A.L.K.E.R 2, it runs considerably better on the AMD cards, especially the RDNA 4 ones. Something that does not change at 1440p. But we now have the 5070 delivering a huge performance increase when overclocked, going from slower than the 4070 Super to 10% faster, with the 9070 being 14% faster than the 5070. And this time we have 1440p ultra-wide instead of 4K, and here the 5070 drops in terms of performance, losing its big lead versus the 4070 Super and being on par with the 7800 XT. In this case, the 9070 is 33% faster than the 5070. Nice results here. God of War has a game engine that seems to like RDNA 4 and Blackwell. And this is the reason why most of the AMD 7000 series don't really perform as they should, and also the reason why the 5070 is faster than the 4070 Super. At 1440p things are more or less the same, but now the 9070 is 10% faster than the 5070, which is a bit more than before, and at 4K the difference grows to 11%, with even the 7800 XT being able to deliver close to 60 average FPS. As for Silent Hill 2, well, in the earlier driver versions the RDNA 3 cards performed quite worse than they should, especially the 7800 XT. So I retested the card and it went from 93 to 111 FPS like you're seeing right now. That's a huge performance increase. And somehow, even the 9070 is barely able to surpass the 5070 at 1080p. And I thought the difference would be bigger at 1440p, but it's actually the opposite, with the 5070 now catching up with the 9070, even surpassing it at 4K. I mean, none of these cards are getting even 60 FPS, but the Nvidia cards do generally deliver better performance in this title. As for Space Marine 2, I also retested all the cards here because since launch, both the RX 9000 series and the 7800 XT got a nice performance uplift. At 1080p, for example, the 9070 XT went from 119 to 135 FPS, which is a considerable boost, with the 9070 going from 120 to 126 FPS, and the 7800 XT getting a slight boost as well, going from 100 to 103. When we move to 1440p though, the 9070 is now able to match the 5070 that is now faster than the 4070 Super by 10%. And at 4K it outmatches it, being now 7% faster. But again, all these cards need FSR or DLSS here in order to achieve 60 average FPS. Hellblade 2 is another Unreal Engine 5 title that simply runs better on the AMD cards. As you can see, at 1080p even the 7800 XT does a decent job or a good job. At 1440p the scales get maintained, with the 9070 being 9% faster than the 5070, which is not that much to be honest, with the 9070 XT of course being considerably faster. And at 4K all GPUs are at around 50 FPS or above, I would say, which is not bad results considering we're using TSR at 75% render scale, with the 9070 XT being the only GPU delivering more than 60 average FPS. As for the averages, we have the 4070 Super stock performance as the base, and as for the colors we have anything below the base performance in yellow and anything 10% above it in green. At 1080p the 5070 is basically on par with the 4070 Super at stock, being only slightly faster once overclocked. As for the 9070 it is around 9% faster than the 5070 stock versus stock and 6% faster OC versus OC. At 1440p the 5070 starts pulling ahead of the 4070 Super, now being slightly faster even at stock, with the 9070 now being 8% faster stock versus stock and 5% faster OC versus OC. And at 4K the differences get maintained, with both the 5070 and the 9070 being able to deliver over 60 average FPS. And again, interesting results that we got here. So now you saw that the RX 9070 is generally faster. I'm really stuttering, kind of, my tongue is not pronouncing the words that I should pronounce. But yeah, you saw that the RX 9070 is generally faster than the RTX 5070, I would say by about 10% considering all resolutions and so on. But in some case scenarios we do have the RX 9070 being up to 33% faster than the RTX 5070, and of course on top of that we have 4GB more of VRAM. But now we have to talk about a field that was brought by Nvidia to the gaming market: ray tracing. And with the 9000 series, AMD delivered a huge performance increase in terms of ray tracing and path tracing performance. So is Nvidia still the king in this performance bracket when it comes to ray tracing? Starting with Cyberpunk 2077, we have the colored bars as rasterization performance and the grey ones as the ray tracing performance. Quite simple, I guess. The thing you immediately see is that even though the 7800 XT performs almost on par with the 4070 Super in terms of rasterization, it immediately falls behind when it comes to ray tracing, with the 4070 Super being 59% faster. But as soon as we go to 5070 versus 9070, we have both delivering around the same results at 1080p for both rasterization and ray tracing. And at 1440p the 9070 even beats the 5070 in its own game, being now faster when running ray tracing as well, showing how much AMD improved in ray tracing in just one generation. Something that gets maintained at 4K, where the 9070 still outmatches the 5070 by a little. As for Resident Evil 4, we have a light ray tracing scenario, and at 1080p even the 7800 XT does fairly well, pushing over 150 FPS. At 1440p all cards are doing a very good job, with the 9070 now being 20% faster than the 5070 even when using ray tracing, and the same applies to 1440p ultra-wide, where the 5070 almost doesn't really lose performance with ray tracing enabled, but the 9070 is still delivering much higher results. As for The Witcher 3, all cards were benchmarked again when using ray tracing, as I now changed the ray tracing settings to the maximum available, in order to see more differences in performance. And at 1080p the 9070 is still outmatching the 5070 in all scenarios. And that still happens at 1440p, where the 9070 is not only faster in the averages, but also brings 27% better 1% lows. AMD cards just perform really smoothly on this game, it is what it is. And at 4K the 5070 loses even more ground, with the 9070 having almost the same FPS with ray tracing and FSR than the 5070 has natively without ray tracing. This again just shows how much AMD improved ray tracing wise. And to finalize the ray tracing part, we have, well, Alan Wake 2 in a really heavy scenario, path tracing. And let me tell you that the reason why this game runs so much better on the Nvidia cards when it comes to path tracing is because Nvidia cards have ray reconstruction, because as soon as you use the game's native denoiser, the Nvidia card's performance just completely tanks. And even here, the AMD cards managed to deliver a very good performance, with the 5070 being 13% faster. But for example, if we get FSR Redstone inside this game with a new ray regeneration denoiser, we would have much better performance here, just stating the facts. As for 1440p, well, none of these cards are able to push more than 42 FPS even with FSR quality, so I don't really think these results really matter. And now that we had rasterization, we had ray tracing, we're also going to test frame generation. And you might ask, well, why test frame generation? In terms of upscaling, things are slightly different, or I wouldn't say different, but they are different of course, but more equal at the same time in terms of the render quality, the render scale and so on. Things are more or less the same. But in terms of frame generation, when it comes to smoothness, the technologies still kind of differ a bit. Usually the AMD frame generation does increase the FPS better and does have better 1% lows. And usually Nvidia DLSS frame generation tends to work considerably worse with lower end GPUs. Even though they improved it with the LSS4 frame generation, they kind of improved it a bit. But still, in terms of smoothness, on an overall picture, it is still not on par with AMD's technology. Of course, if you put aside multi-frame generation. But anyway, let's see. Frame generation was also retested in Space Marine 2 as the performance changed a bit, and I made Nvidia cards use the new version of the LSS frame generation through the app, even though we now have a new update that just enabled that inside the game. At 1080p things are expected, I would say, with both the 7800 XT and the 9070 delivering less FPS without frame generation, but a much more stable and smoother experience with it enabled. And the same happens at 1440p, with the 9070 delivering a much smoother experience when using frame generation, with higher averages and way higher 1% lows. At 4K, both the 5070 and the 9070 have around the same base FPS numbers, but the 9070's frame generation just works much better, delivering a smoother experience, which is what we expect from frame generation, I guess. And S.T.A.L.K.E.R's 2 frame generation also works quite poorly on all Nvidia cards I've tested so far. I mean, even when not using frame generation, you can see that the 9070 delivers the same average FPS as the 5070, but delivers 22% higher 1% lows. And when enabling frame generation, the difference is just insane. And going to 1440p sadly didn't change anything for the 5070, that still delivered piss poor smoothness with frame generation enabled. Worse than the 4070 Super actually. And I really hope things would change at 4K, but not really. For this game, the AMD counterparts are just definitely the best choice. As for Call of Duty Black Ops 6, well, it is the opposite. Even though AMD cards work much better natively compared to the Nvidia ones, AMD has some serious issues when it comes to frame generation. The 7800 XT is working well, for example, but the 1% lows are broken. And the 9000 series aren't even working at all at 1080p. And as we move to 1440p, they start working, but the smoothness increase is still too low. And it seems that at 4K we finally have some improvements in that regard, where all the AMD cards seem to be working at least decently, but with the smoothness increase still being lower than usual. Really odd results here. And well guys, now you saw rasterization, ray tracing, path tracing, frame generation, you saw everything, you saw prices, you saw everything. What card should you pick? And of course I know you guys will say that I'm an AMD fanboy, that's why I'm recommending it, but I can and I will always recommend the RX 9070 over the 5070. The first reason is that it has 16GB VRAM instead of 12GB. The second reason is that at full load the card's power draw are basically the same. 5070 versus 9070, if you overclock both cards, the power consumption is basically the same at full load. There are some games where the 5070 does consume less power, not in all, but in some games it does consume less power, but the difference is so little that, I mean, for $50 more, you have 16GB VRAM and you have 10% more performance, up to 33% more performance, depending on the title. And of course, now you have FSR 4, you're gonna have FSR, with FSR Redstone, you're going to get ray regeneration and so on. So it's kind of up to you as well, but in my opinion, you should definitely pick the RX 9070. It's just a much better choice, and you'll still get more and more features in the future from AMD, while on the Nvidia side I don't really know if you're going to get the RTX 6000 Jesus Christ, I don't know if you're going to get the RTX 6000 series features on your RTX 5070. I don't really know if that's the case, or that's going to be the case, while with AMD I'm pretty sure that the next generation features will also be on the 9000 series. That's why they are kind of working the ground for it. As for the RTX 5070, well, you have other things like multi-frame generation. If you want to use multi-frame generation, AMD doesn't really have it yet. They might have in the future, but not yet, so that's a point to consider for you guys that want to use the multi-frame generation. I honestly didn't test it on the 5070 yet. I tested it on the 5080 and it worked great. But again, we have 256-bit buzz, and of course, we have 16GB VRAM, not 192 and 12GB VRAM. And in some scenarios, only having 192-bit buzz and 12GB VRAM might actually, well, not perform as you want it to in situations where you're using multi-frame generation in a game that consumes a lot of VRAM. It will actually decrease the FPS because you'll get out of bandwidth and it will be a mess. Generally, it will be okay, but not in all scenarios. So yeah, 9070, $50 more, get the 9070, you still get FSR 4, lots of features like image sharpening 2, AMD chat, whatever you want, and on top of that, of course, you have 4GB VRAM more. If you want to go more to the full feature side, Of course, then you can get the 5070, but 12 gigabytes of VRAM is the absolute minimum nowadays, I would say. And going for a card that costs $549 and only getting 12 gigabytes is a bit less to me. So yeah, either go to the 5070 Ti or just get the 9070 Non-XT. Definitely. That's all for today's video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Hope you really enjoyed it. And by the way, if you have any doubts, leave them in the comment section. As always, I'll answer as fast as I can. And also, leave in the comment section and let me know if you would get the 9070 or the 5070, or if you didn't get... Jesus Christ, I'm messing around the words so much today. If you indeed get... or got the 5070 or the 9070, and if you were thinking about one or the other, and which one did you decide to buy? Just let me know in the comment section, and see you in the next video, guys. Cheers.